So this week we talked about how to bust the myths that hold you back. And Sarah and I were always like, what topic should we talk about? Because 300 and something episodes in, it's not always easy to come up with a new podcast topic every week. And I had this idea, and Sarah was like, I'm not really sure. And so I did a post on LinkedIn to talk about, like basically to say, we're thinking about doing this podcast. Like, these are some of the myths that we think are hanging around. Do you think that this would be a useful podcast? And have you got any other myths that you feel are quite pervasive in terms of careers? And loads of people replied, and they were like, yes, cover this podcast. And here are some other myths. So before I share some of those, morning, Lauren, did anyone listen to the podcast? And if you did, let us know what stuck. You don't have to have listened to the podcast to come on PodPlus. Regular PodPlusers will know that. But did anyone listen? And if you have managed to listen in the last couple of days, just give us sharing strengths. Alison, we're going to talk about that a little bit. The idea of sharing your strengths rather than feeling like you're selling them. So we'll come back to that. Links to a myth around that people have, that like talking about their strengths is quite an arrogant thing to do. Good. Laura and Alison both on that one. Sharing strengths. And we're going to talk about that. If it doesn't exist, you can't do it one. Brilliant. Okay, good. Everybody who hasn't listened, do not worry. We're going to cover some of this stuff right now. So these were some of the most common myths that came up on the LinkedIn post that I did to kind of surface whether this felt like a relevant topic for people. So things like, I'm only successful if I'm senior. Like, the seniority in your career is basically what success looks like. And I think, intuitively, we sort of know that that's not true. We know that success is different, but sometimes when you get a bit ladder-like, it still feels like if you're not senior, you're not successful, holds people back in all kinds of ways. I would not be doing Amazing if that myth was in my mind, because I wouldn't have left Microsoft. I would have taken a more senior job. And that wouldn't have been right. It wouldn't have been the right thing for me, and hopefully we've helped other people because of it. So that's one of the myths. A lot of people have a myth around, like, basically their day job taking precedence over their development. So they get into this sort of myth mindset where it's like, well, I've got to get everything done I need to do today before I can look at my development. And the problem with that is the to-do list just never ends. It never ends. I feel like maybe it used to. I'm going back to like Sarah and me working in Boots in 2005 when I had Lotus Notes and I didn't have a laptop. And I feel like when I left Boots head office in Beeston and I went home, work sort of stopped because I couldn't get on it anymore. And now work just doesn't stop because every device has some way of infiltrating my personal time. And also just mentally, I don't think I switch off quite as easily as I used to. So we can't let that be a myth, because the day job will never get done. It just won't. There's too much to do. And so we have to find a way to reprioritize that. This is the one that somebody mentioned. Who was it? Who also mentioned? Leanne mentioned this one. If it doesn't exist, you can't do it. So it's almost like you're in this wait mode in your organization for this opportunity that you're looking for. Like, you're waiting for it to just like show up on an intranet somewhere, because the assumption is, well, if I can't see it, then it doesn't exist, and therefore I can't do it. We will challenge some of that stuff together. Another one, talking about your development equals I'm looking to leave. So this is a really interesting myth where people feel that if they talk to their manager or a mentor, but I think this myth is more with managers, but they talk to them about their career development, like different things they might want to do in or outside the company, or maybe working like a squiggly sideways move, then their manager's going to think that they are looking to leave, and therefore they don't want them to think that, so therefore they don't talk about their development. Do you get the weird cycle that happens here? And again, I've definitely had this one. But I think the reframe here is like, it's not about looking to leave, it's about looking to learn. And when you have that sort of mindset, it's much easier to have these conversations about your career. There's loads of myths, everybody. I'll stop in a minute, and this is nowhere near all of them. But another one, learning is all about the skills you need to support the job you're doing today. So this one really constrains your curiosity, if this is the myth that you hold, because it's like, okay, well, I'm currently an account manager, so all of my learning should be focused on how I could be a better account manager. And I would say 50% of your learning should be focused on how you should be a better account manager, and then 50% of it should be about future skills that all of us need to have, and then also future skills for your future possibilities, for the different things you might want to do. And so it's really thinking a bit more broadly about learning. And then the last one that I'll talk about now, but as I said, it's not the only one. Performance equals promotion. This is a really tricky one. So this is the sort of myth that, well, if I just work hard, if I just show up and I work hard, then I'll go up the ladder, right? No, wrong. It just doesn't work like that. It's not so binary, but people get really frustrated because they go, well, I'm working hard and I'm here and I'm committed, I'm doing a good job, so why aren't I getting promoted? And there's a whole other load of factors that are nothing to do with how hard you work that are why you might not be getting promoted. Internal politics, the number of positions that are promotions, just loads of stuff that's actually a bit tricky for you to influence. And so it's a myth that can actually really demotivate people, this one, because they probably are doing a brilliant job and they are probably working really hard, but there's not a direct correlation in a squiggly world of work between performance and promotion. That there should be between performance and progression, but that's bigger than promotion. So do any of these resonate with you, everybody? And let's stick stars on my screen. So if any of these at any point in your career, and I'll explain how to do the stars thing for anyone who doesn't know, if any of these myths have got in your way in terms of your mindset at any point in your career, stick out. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make it anonymous. There we go, it's anonymous. Stick stars on any of the ones that you think, yeah, that's definitely been part of my thinking at different points in time in my career. For anyone who doesn't know how to do the star thing, maybe because you knew, it's at the top of your screen. It's view options, so like get cursor, view options, and then it's annotate, and then it's stamp, and then it's star. And Sarah's just put in the chat like the instructions for you. Don't worry if you can't do it, but I always think it's quite an interesting way, just as a group of us seeing where we're at. So it looks like that performance one. That performance one is resonating with people. Are there any that I've missed? Just out of interest, any that I've missed that come to mind for you? Any myths that you're like, oh, now I kind of get where you're going with this myth thing, Helen. This is a one that you've not mentioned that feels relevant for me. Really good one, Lucy. This job can't be done part-time. Yeah. Also, that's a myth that sort of gets reinforced in conversations all the time. Like, I've definitely been jobs with, oh, now you're doing a big, well, this is a big role and it's not a big role that can be done part-time. And I don't think I believe that. I also think even if it was true, it doesn't mean there can't be a job share option. Like if it genuinely has to be a 5-day a week, 8 hours a day job, then you don't have to be the person doing all of that. Yeah. Oh, you've got loads, everybody. I don't know whether this is good or bad. I have to be super confident to be senior. Yeah. I was at an event yesterday. Who was the amazing, someone was like introvert. Oh, so Lucy's in team, and she's got an amazing yellow jumper on today, or mustard. We saw this amazing woman called Dr. Usher yesterday present at this event. Like, introverted power was amazing. Wasn't the hi, I'm ta-da, which I can sometimes be a bit like annoyingly, but she wasn't, and she was way more powerful on stage because of it. Calm, collected, just like a masterclass in introverted leading yesterday. What else have we got? Female leader, not appropriate. Yeah, I mean, I hate that myth. I was going to swear, I really hate that myth. And hopefully we're busting it a bit more in society there. Yeah, asking for help on Yaka, morning. I'm going to talk about that one as well. Brilliant. I mean, you've got loads. I mean, it's not necessarily a good thing, is it? But this is the reality, that these myths exist, and they definitely hold lots of people back. Sort of biases really to do with ourselves. Okay, I'm going to get rid of your stars, and what we are going to do is talk about principles of myth busting. So there's some principles that can be applied to all of these myths generally, with how you can sort of readdress them. And then I've got 5 that I'm going to go through pretty quickly. They're the ones that we talked about on the podcast, but I thought what we could do as a group is come up with some different examples. I'll explain when we get to it. So myth busting, any myths that you go, hang on a minute, like any of the ones that you've written down, a few sort of principles for how you might want to go about busting these things. First of all, relook at the origin of the myth. So sometimes we just assume something is true. Oh, you have to be an extrovert to be a leader. Oh, you always have to talk in meetings if you want to make a good contribution. Oh, you have to be young if you want to get ahead in blah, blah, blah industry. Like, we sort of assume this stuff is true because either it's been in our head for a while or someone said it to us at one point in time. Instead of assuming, start sort of asking a little bit more. Oh, I would always say I was always told if you like don't like something to say that that's interesting or different. That's what I always got told by my stepmother. She's like, Helen, if you don't like something, say it's interesting. So I would say, oh, that's an interesting point of view. Tell me a little bit more about where that's come from. Which basically means I don't agree with you. I'm not confident enough to say it quite like that. So I'm gonna have a curious conversation about it. But just get curious about the origins. Don't always assume that because it's been in your mind for a while or because somebody else has said it. Even the stuff that's in my mind, I'm like, where did you get that? When did that start? Like, when did you start believing that? Like, if you can ask, sometimes you can start to sort of address the assumption a little bit more. Other thing that's really useful is to literally like restate the opposite. So like Laura's put in chat, you always have to say something in meetings. Okay, so the opposite is, how could I make an impact by not saying anything? Like, and you suddenly get to an interest of, well, how could I? Maybe I could share some thoughts in advance, or maybe I could follow up within, 24 hours with, this is what I've reflected on, and this is what I've realized as a result. I mean, that's probably no one else is going to do that. So if 10 other people are talking in the meeting, they're all getting a bit lost in noise. If you're the one person who does my reflections and realizations as a result by email, it's probably going to have more impact. So often playing around with opposites can help you come up with some sort of new opportunities. And then I always really like looking at the outliers. This is what we're going to do today, everyone. You are the outliers, I'm hoping. The outliers are the people that show you the proof that this isn't true. So for example, the person who you think is impactful that never speaks in meetings, but you're like, but they're still influential. So what are they doing? Outliers, really, really interesting to look at. I'd love to hear more about succeeding in a new field when you're older. Wow. Let's look at people maybe who've restarted careers and who are older and done it amazingly. I tell you someone who is really good there. Oh, Lucy. She used to be an FT. What is her name? She used to be an FT journalist, and then she went to be a teacher, and now she's got a really good podcast. Can you remember her name? If not, I'll find it for you. Lucy, I want to say Kia, but I don't think it's Kia. But a really good example of somebody who's kind of more tenured in their career, who sort of restarted. And that's it. Thank you, Rachel. I knew someone would know it. Lucy Kellaway. Really interesting. FT journalist, completely restarted as a teacher, has written quite a lot about it. Pretty sure she's on a podcast as well. But she would be, for me, an outlier. So when you look at and go, well, that thing that I'm believing isn't true, because like, here is an example of someone who's done it brilliantly. Oh, I'm Fiona. Okay, we're going to do the outliers together. So what I thought we would do together, everybody, is we take the 5 myths that we talked about on the podcast, and then I'll do a bit of busting. So I'll kind of do the opposite. If that's the myth, what's the opposite? Then I thought we could share the outliers together. Like, do you know anyone who has done the opposite of this? So we have evidence that this isn't true, and then I'll very quickly share an action. I've got 5 to go through, so we're going to have to be a little bit speedy. I should have just done 3. Why? I don't know why I don't learn. Okay, so myth number 1: if it doesn't exist, it can't be done. Bust that myth. I think about this. If it doesn't exist, it's basically an opportunity in waiting. That is how I think about it. I'm like, well, if that job that I really want to do isn't in this business yet, then I just need to find a way to talk to people about it, or I need to show them that this is in a different bit. I just think this is an opportunity in waiting, not an obstacle, an opportunity. That's kind of your busting approach there. Has anybody got a good example of either how they have created a role that didn't exist for them, or it could be like Lucy said earlier about can't do it part-time, like because no one does it part-time. It could be just like a reshaping of a role that didn't exist until you did it, or you created a role that didn't exist until you did it, or it might be someone that you know. Has anyone got a good example for us of who's done that in their career, or seen somebody create something that didn't exist until they did it? So Victoria says, I've created jobs for others where I've spotted a need as we've grown as a company. So really good evidence there that it can be done. And also lots of generosity in doing that for other people. It's a good reason why you need to make sure that your strengths are known, because if people like Victoria are creating roles for you, like they're going to do it around things that they see that you're good at. Laura says, I created a role for myself a few years ago with great support from a leader at the time. Brilliant. Claire says, I have created a more creative role for myself in the health and social care sector. Yeah, and sometimes a soft way of creating can be job crafting, and a more significant way could be like a brand new role. I've done it a few times, and it's really empowering when you do it, because I always think about it's a bit like, I've never really done this, but when people buy a house, is it called off plot? I'm very in house mode at the moment because I'm buying a new house. It is definitely not off plot, but when they buy it from scratch and you get to like design everything, like the tiles, the carpet, the handles, the knobs, all that stuff. I think it's a bit like that when you design your own role. You get that like freedom. Onyeka, what's job crafting? It's sort of evolving the role that you are in today. So often we start a job and we're given a job description, but the reality is that the roles evolve and we can take more control over that evolution when we are consciously job crafting. We've done a podcast episode on it. We've done a podcast on that. Really helped us during a period of absence. I'm just going to read Nita's last one. Nita says, 14 years ago, I moved back from the US to the UK, ended up being their first part-time remote employee, part-time and remote. Wow. It was a small family business and this was new to them and it showed trust is earned. And now everyone is doing it. You're the pioneer, Nita, you're the pioneer. Okay, right, let's go on to another. That's example. Action here. We talk about in the podcast, but pitch, prototype, pilot. So if you want to create something that doesn't exist yet, pitch the idea. Like I would always say, wouldn't it be amazing if, generally, so pitch it to somebody, prototype it so they can see what it looks like. That could be as simple as going, this job exists in this other company. This is what I think how it could fit in our team, like even like an org chart or something like that, or show them what the roles and responsibilities could be. Basically, like make it like an idea with a practical build. That's why I always think a prototype is that someone can see. And I personally find that when I put something on paper, that's when people start to look at it, or on a PowerPoint slide, and they sort of build on it, because it's not just an idea in your head, it's something that they can build on. And then pilot, like you can say, well, why don't I try it out for a month? Maybe you're going to do part-time or remote working, and you can say, well, try it out for a period of time. It lowers the sense of commitment from somebody, and often when you prove it works, which it generally does, then you get support for it ongoing. So different way of acting on it. Next one, asking for help is a sign of weakness. Comes up a lot. Bust that myth. Asking for help is a sign of strength. It's quite a simple opposite. But that's easy to say, so it might be difficult to do. So let's find some examples of people who have done that. Who has helped themselves out by asking for help? Who maybe has an example of when they asked for help with a particular situation, they succeeded more as a result of it. Like they achieved more, they succeeded more. My most notable example of this comes from the conversation we had with Simon Sinek on the podcast when he was when I talked to him, and his best piece of career advice was all about asking for help. And he basically said that the more senior and successful he became, the more scared he became of asking for help, because he felt like everyone thought that he knew everything. And when he realized that he could ask for help, it really accelerated his development. Anyone got an example of when they asked for help and they really, so Laura, first time managing, asked to set up regular one-to-ones with more experienced manager, brilliant. Yeah, and that takes confidence, right? Because you could think, I don't want everyone to think that it's my first time managing, but actually just being honest about it means you get more support. Francesca, how do you make it less of a taboo? So let's move quickly then on to the action here. The more you do it, the easier it is. The more people see you do it, the more they will do it. So that supports the cultural point. But really important is that you make the ask really easy. Easy for you as the asker, and easy for the person who's being asked to help. So if I'm like, I'm struggling being a manager for the first time, can you help me? That's a bit big. It's not that easy, and that's going to make me feel quite vulnerable. Whereas if you think through, we talk about the 3 S's, support, solutions, or sounding boards. So support is, I'm struggling. I'd like to get some support with the situation because I'm finding it hard. Solutions are, I've got some ideas. I'd love to get your input on them. Sorry. A sounding board is, I've got some ideas, I'd love to get your input on them. And solutions is, I'm going to come to you for ideas, basically. And if you can really get specific about what the help is that you need, it can make it easier for you to ask, because you know specifically what you're asking for. And it can make it easier for someone to help you, because they're clear about what you were expecting from them. We've talked about asking for help again on a podcast previously. Okay, 7 minutes, 3 to go. Talking about my strengths is arrogance. Again, that one came up quite a lot. That it could be strengths or it could be successes, actually. It could be like the things that I do well, or the things that I have achieved. And those sorts of things often trigger a myth that, oh, I can't talk about this because people will think I'm just like being really egotistical. And we need to bust that myth, because it definitely holds people back when they don't talk about their strengths. And that's not the right one. We want you to see talking about your strengths as actually a way of building, helping you to use them more. So talking about your strengths is a way you can use them more. So if you don't talk about your strengths, you're not going to get a chance to use them as much in your roles. People aren't going to spot opportunities for you. You're not going to make as big an impact. The more you are known for your strengths, the more other people will find opportunities to use them. So talking about your strengths actually becomes quite sort of self-fulfilling in a Squiggly career, because it builds your brand, and then people match you to opportunities. So has anyone got an example of when they have sort of confidently talked about their strengths, the things that they do well at work, and that has led to like a positive response from people, when people have been like, oh, I'm really glad that you talked to me about that? It's so helpful to learn from the questions. It is. Has anyone got an example of when they talked about their strengths and it was positively received by other people? That people are like, oh, I'm really glad you said that. I often see it a lot with Sarah, actually. So Sarah is an introvert, and I think it's really helpful for other introverts to see Sarah talking about her strengths and things confidently, because they're like, oh, she's an introvert and she's talking about her strengths, but she's not coming across in an arrogant way. So I see it very much in a lot of how Sarah shares the things that she's good at. Anyone else got an example? I think it's all in the way you phrase it. Yeah. Genevieve says, I did the Google I'm Remarkable training through work, and now we're all encouraged to talk about our strengths. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really useful to do it in like team meetings as well, because that sort of hopefully feels like a safer space. Onyeka, I shared being shortlisted for a writing competition on LinkedIn and was approached to write more. That, again, Onyeka's example there is like the self-fulfilling thing, like sharing your successes, other people see it, and then they're like, oh, here's another opportunity, or could you do this? I'm a bit known for attention to detail. Victoria, didn't you send me an email about like a typo or something on copy? I'm sure you did. So yeah, I'm a bit known for attention to detail, so I do get called out on this thing and I enjoy it. Brilliant. I'm sure you did. It was really helpful. Amazing. Can't help myself. No, I mean, we need the help. So like, don't stop. It's very useful. So the action. Oh no, it's because I've written on here, my little pop-ups have gone. So the action on here was to share, not sell. So it's not about me going, oh, I'm amazing at career development, and that's like me just selling it in a way that someone might go, okay, that doesn't sound particularly useful or helpful. It's thinking about, well, how could I share my strength? Who could I help with that career development skill? How could I help them? So you don't have to like talk about your strengths on a podium and go, I am amazing at attention to detail. Actually, it's more like, how do you share that strength? So Victoria, for example, getting in touch with me to say, like, I can't help myself. I know that you care about your words, but this one's basically written wrong. It's actually a really helpful way of sharing that strength. So think more about how you can share them as much as possible, rather than how you can sort of sell them to everybody. How many more? We've got two more in 3 minutes. Okay. I need to tick all the boxes to apply. So that obviously gets in the way of people applying for jobs, that they think they read it and they're like, I haven't done that, therefore I can't do this. Not true. Instead, think about a lot of job applications and job descriptions. They're like wish lists of like the perfect person. I'd like everything, please. It's more important that you are able to demonstrate a willingness to learn. Imagine if you could tick every box, but that you were never going to learn anything in the future. You're not a good hire. Somebody who is willing to learn and able to demonstrate that is a much, much better hire for an organization in kind of a world of work that's constantly changing. Has anyone got an example of where they have got over that myth? They have applied for a job that on paper they couldn't do. Like on paper, it was like, I can't do this job, but they applied for it and they did it, and you did it brilliantly anyway. Dan says, I moved from food retail to fashion using your transferable skills. Brilliant. Oh, Dan, we heard about circular fashion yesterday at the event. All kinds of, from the British Fashion Council. It was riveting. And a brilliant organisation called the Glass Onion, who are recycling clothes and doing some cool stuff with them. There's a complete side point that I haven't got time to make with 2 minutes left, but it was very interesting. Anybody else who has got an example of when they've applied for a role that they definitely couldn't do on paper? Sarah moved from an account manager role to education design role, was given the training to do it. Rima applied to a job that required perfect German, whereas mine is just good. They hired me and another German speaker. That's really cool. So that's such a good example, Rima. So maybe they did need somebody who could speak perfect German, but actually it didn't have to be you, because you brought some other stuff as well. Amazing. Oh, good fashion build. Thanks, Dan. We always talk about here, the action is to own the gap. Like, don't try and cover it up, because it'll become quite obvious. And you'll create doubts about you and your development in an interviewer's mind. Instead, I would acknowledge it and own it. I'd be like, okay, well, I haven't worked in fashion before, but I have been following it for a lot of years. I think these 3 themes are, and then there'll be the top trends in the industry are what I'm passionate about. And I've actually already started studying for this on the side. Like, if you can show the willingness to learn and that you are owning the gap, you can often overcome bits that you've not ticked. Last but not least, 1 minute to go. Going back means going backwards. So let's say you loved working in an industry or an organization or a profession, but you'll think, well, I can't go back because it'll look like I failed, or it look like I don't know what I'm doing, or it look like I'm going backwards in my career. It holds people back in lots of ways when that myth is in their mind. So I just think about it as being able to think about going back is just opening up another direction for your development. It's just going to increase your options. So if I think, well, could I go back to Virgin? Could I go back to marketing? Could I go back to sales? I don't think about that as going backwards. I just think about it as another opportunity. Has anyone really got an example super quickly where they've gone back to something they've done before and it's been a brilliant move for them to make? So I don't know, job, industry, type really quick so we can all see that there is evidence that going back can be brilliant. And while you are typing that super quickly, we talk about working your weak ties as a really good way to cultivate opportunities in areas you've been in before. We've done a podcast on working your weak ties. If you're like, well, how do I do that, Helen? We've covered it. Lisa's going back to working with a previous colleague. Brilliant. I think we will probably have to go, but if anyone has quickly got an example, let us know. Hopefully that was helpful. Back to work in retail, central functions. Thank you. I know everyone's got to go. Pod notes, pod sheets, pod mail, all that stuff is available for you. It's all on our website. Email us if you ever get stuck and you can't find it. Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of your week and see you all very soon. Bye for now. Bye.